15th February, 1884. I have had a curious and most disturbing dream, which I feel compelled to set down here in words before I forget it. It is still many hours until dawn. Anna is sleeping. I write by the light of a single candle at her desk. In my dream, I wandered the halls of my parents' manse. The walls were red with blood, the floors littered with the bones of animals. Horrible chanting came from all around me, and I walked without purpose, but also without fear. I was searching for something I knew, yet I could not remember what it was I sought. I found my way to the basement, where a ring of lit candles had been arrayed before the red door, which was huge and imposing, swelled to 3 times its natural size. Outside the ring of candles gathered a group of 5 people, 3 adults and 2 children, and within the ring was another child, a girl, 14 if I had to guess, stripped naked and pinned to the floor by invisible restraints. As I watched, the horrible chanting reached a climax. The girl screamed. The door burst open. I was paralyzed with fear as some horrible, indescribable thing snatched the girl from the ground and dragged her away into the darkness beyond. The door closed, and the 5 hooded figures turned to me. I could see their eyes burning bright beneath their cowls, and they beckoned to me. I felt myself compelled to walk towards them, unable to resist. Just as I reached the ring of candles, I awoke, sweating bullets and panting as though I had run a marathon. I cannot conceive of what this means, yet I cannot disregard it. The superstition in me whispers that it was a vision sent by the door of centuries past, events that unfolded in my own home. Yet still, I have the sense to know that it is likely only the attempts of my subconscious mind to piece together the events of the past few days, and that invention and fantasy, not premonition or vision, were the cause of this nightmare. Come morning, I shall tell Anna about it. She will, I hope, be able to cast some sensible light upon the issue. Later. Such a day I have had! To set it all down in writing in the order in which it all happened will be a task indeed, especially for a mind so currently disordered as my own. When Anna woke at last, I was drowsing at her desk, my head resting upon my own journal. She wakened me, and I told her briefly of the dream I had had. "Of course, Leslie, your mind invents such things," she told me gently. "In dreams, we make stories of our fears so that we may end them. To you there are many fears, so your mind weaves for you a frightful story. Of premonitions, I think not, nor of sight into past. For where then is evidence of so gruesome deeds? No, Leslie, I think your mind, he frightens you in sleep because you will not listen to his stories when you are awake." This was a comforting response, confirming my own better judgment, and I thanked her for her input. We breakfasted in her flat, then headed into the streets to find Mad Zeke. The red door, I was dismayed to see, was still lurking in the back of the antiquities shop. Anna hurried me past it, with a murmured admonition not to look at it. Out in the streets, the spirit of the city had taken a frightful turn. People in the streets moved quickly, heads down, eyes darting. Few walked alone, and those who conversed did so in whispers. Anna did not seem to notice this moody pall, which I attributed to her not being a London native. I was, understandably, more in tune with the nature of the citizenry than she. As we walked the streets, I bought a paper, curious as to the possible cause of the frightened populace. I was immediately rewarded for my curiosity. I will paste here the article that occupied the front page in its entirety, as I doubt I can tell its story any better in my own words. Murder in Cavendish. Man found dead, mauled in St. James Square. Police baffled. A body was found in the greenery around St. James Square last night, with marks of being savaged by what police investigators have called either a beast or a madman. The body was discovered by one Jamie Hollander, 43, of 81 Jermyn Street, as he took his dog, Butters, on an unexpectedly late walk. "Butters was winding up a storm," Hollander told Times reporter Gerald Rivets, 32, in an interview this morning. "So I took him out for walkies, as the missus couldn't get a moment's shut-eye. Once we were outside, he darted straight for St. James, off like a greyhound. When I got there, I could see something had been stuffed into the greenery. Butters was barking like nothing I'd ever heard." Mr. Hollander proceeded to call local authorities, who extracted the body from the greenery. An identification of the body has not yet been released, although one Detective Murphy, 54, of Scotland Yard, is quoted as saying the wounds were too severe for any proper identification to be possible. The victim's pockets were empty, although the quality of his clothes suggested high society, as Murphy told us. Honestly, the police haven't got a clue, Murphy admitted in a late-night interview last night. All we can say for certain is that he wasn't killed in St. James. When asked as to the nature of the crime, Murphy declined to comment. Hollander, however, gave this statement. "I hardly feel safe walking the streets. To think that any man or beast which could do that to a man is walking the streets of London, well, it puts me off my supper. I doubt I shall feel safe again until the perpetrator is duly dispatched." For this reporter, at any rate, that statement rings true. The police request that any information pertaining to the crime should be delivered to them immediately at any of the stations around London. Inquiries regarding the crime, however, have been discouraged by Detective Murphy, who implores citizens to stay together, stay aware, and for God's sake, stay calm. Gerald Rivers. I related the contents of the paper to Anna, whose jaw clenched. "You think it is Jory?" she asked. "I hope it isn't," I replied, "but I can't deny the possibility." "Perhaps we should seek Detective Murphy," Anna suggested. "We have information which is important to crime." I hesitated at this. Let's continue to Mad Zeke's first. If what Murphy told us last time we saw him is true, we may kill two birds with one stone. Anna cocked her head. "This is English expression? To kill two birds with one stone?" "Yes, it's an idiom of sorts." "I do not like it," she pronounced. "I do not like idea of throwing rocks at poor little birds." We continued on to Mad Zeke's hovel. It became quickly apparent that someone else was already there, as there were voices emanating from inside. I recognized one as Mad Zeke's. The other, I thought, was quite possibly Detective Murphy's. We stopped outside the entrance, and I hesitated, wondering again how one knocks at a place without doors. "Someone out there?" Mad Zeke called from within. He poked his head out through the flap, saw us, and broke into a nearly toothless grin. "Ah, it's you two! Come in, we've been expecting you." Puzzled, I entered the hovel, Anna close behind me. Detective Murphy sat cross-legged in the far corner, notepad perched on his knee, pencil hovering over the paper. Anna and I settled in, acutely aware of Murphy's gaze on us. "Mr. Fletcher," he said by way of greeting. "Miss Maximiuk." "Detective Murphy," I returned, inclining my head slightly. "You expected us?" Anna asked Mad Zeke, who laughed. "I expected you. I doubt Sammy here knows what to expect." "What brings you here?" Murphy asked me. I held up the paper. "Quite probably the same thing that brings you here, Detective Murphy. May I ask you a question?" Murphy grunted, which I could only assume passed for a yes. "What happened to Jory Masterson's body?" Murphy's expression did not change one iota, yet his whole body froze in place. It was as though I was looking at a photograph of the man, rather than the man himself. Slowly, he lifted his head and put down his pencil. "It vanished," he said at last. "It was taken from the funeral parlor in the night a week ago." His eyes suddenly narrowed. "What does that have to do with anything? And why would you think to ask?" "I saw Jory Masterson 2 nights ago," I said. Murphy perked up. "You know where the body was taken?" I shook my head. "You misunderstand. When I saw Jory, he was walking towards me through the fog." "That's impossible. He's dead." "I realize that, Detective Murphy. Nevertheless, he was walking towards me through the fog, chest open, seaweed spilling out of him. Anna rescued me at the last moment, otherwise I don't know what he would have done to me." I paused. "Possibly whatever he did to the man in Cavendish." "That is an entirely unfounded supposition," Murphy told me, "in addition to being one of the most ridiculous stories I have ever heard." "It is true," Anna told him. "I am there when Leslie has so near brush with death." Murphy raised an eyebrow. "You saw the creature?" Anna fidgeted, the first time I had ever seen her do so. "No, I do not see creature." "And do either of you have any evidence to support the idea that this walking dead man murdered someone and stuffed the body into the greenery at St. James Square?" Our silence was, I believe, answer enough for him. "I appreciate your willingness to help," Detective Murphy said, "but I'd prefer it if you didn't waste my time." "That's rude," Mad Zeke put in. "And anyway, weren't you just telling me that the cause of death was drowning? That you found seaweed under the man's fingernails?" Murphy shot him a withering glare. "Not in front of the civilians, Zeke," he admonished. "I've managed to keep it out of the papers so far. I don't need these two running off to tattle." He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Practically a laughingstock already. Police baffled, because that inspires confidence from the populace." "Detective Murphy, if I may," I cut in. "You didn't believe us for a moment, even though there was evidence supporting our story. Why would any reporter believe it?" "Because reporters are stupid and gullible, and your fantasy makes a good story," Murphy retorted. "So don't go spouting it to anyone else, or we'll have a damn panic on our hands." "The people of London, they will so panic?" Anna asked. Of course, Murphy answered. That's how people are. Anna shook her head. That is how English are. In Petersburg, if newsman says there is monster walking streets and killing men, nobody panics. Instead, all take torches and guns and hunt down monster until he is dead. But don't you ever get the wrong fellow? Murphy asked. Sometimes, Anna admitted. And then it is tragedy. But always we kill monster. It sounds like a brutal place, and I'm glad I'm not a policeman there, Murphy proclaimed. Nonetheless, this is London, not St. Petersburg, and if the people here think there's a monster roaming the streets, I don't like to think what'll happen. So how you will kill monster, then? Anna asked. Murphy sighed heavily. That's the question of the hour, isn't it? Please, I entreated. Let us help you. We may not be able to do much, but we'd be glad to assist in any way we can. He cocked an eyebrow at me. You think I haven't already got every man in the force on this case? Well, you haven't, have you? Madzik put in. Being as there's 100 other open cases in London at the moment. Nonetheless, Murphy said stiffly, I doubt there's any help these two could provide that my officers couldn't. Apart from having seen the creature that's roaming your streets and of being of particular interest to it? Madzik asked. No, other than that, not really helpful at all. I disliked the idea of being of particular interest to the creature that had been Jory, but I could not deny the truth of Madzik's statement. What are you suggesting I do? Murphy asked him. Use them as bait? I'd never, Zeke replied. But now that you mention it, it's not a bad idea. It is in fact a bad idea, I cried. No, I think that Ezekiel is correct, Anna said. If we wish to kill this creature, we must first lure him out of hiding. When we can confront him, surely we can kill him. Anna, I said sternly, you haven't seen the thing. Being the only one here who's seen it, I can testify that it's not something you'd want to meet. Ever. So what would you suggest we do, Mr. Fletcher? Detective Murphy inquired. It was your idea that the so-called creature murdered the man in St. James after all. Yes, but that doesn't mean I'd be willing to let the same thing happen to me. It's the job of the police to handle things like this, not mine. Anna pinched my ear between her fingers like a mother scolding a child. Leslie, one day I will teach you proper respect for people who are not you. Stop that! I cried. Madzik laughed at me, but Anna did release my ear. And it wasn't disrespect. I didn't sign up for this sort of thing. It's the sworn duty of policemen to take care of it. I can tell you quite honestly, Mr. Fletcher, that I never signed up to handle walking dead men, Detective Murphy told me. And at any rate, I refuse to get myself killed and mutilated by anyone, much less a horrible seaweed monster. Very well, so Leslie is coward. I will face monster. We stared at Anna, gobsmacked, our mouths hanging open. Madzik grinned at her and shook his head. I recovered my voice at last, after a moment or two of swallowing down the shock. You can't, I said. She glared at me. You are no one to say what I can and cannot do. You'll be killed! No, monster will be killed. I will be brave hero of London, you will still be coward. I'm not going to let you go out there alone, I declared. You will not stop me. I know that. I'm going with you. Anna regarded me silently for a moment, then smiled. So suddenly he is again brave. When Englishman Leslie gets hot blood, he's become suddenly real man. Much as I enjoy your banter, Murphy told us, I think you've wasted enough of my time with your cockamamie plans. You're saying you won't help us? I cried. That's precisely what I'm saying, Murphy replied. You two may kill yourselves in whatever way you wish, whether it's lurking about in the fog until you catch cold, or luring a seaweed monster out to devour you. I won't help you do it. But if we should catch this monster, Anna said. You won't, Murphy said, because there is no monster. How do you know? I asked. You have no evidence to the contrary. Rather the opposite, if I may say so. I know there's no monster, Murphy said, because there's no such thing as monsters. Only people who act like them, and madmen who believe in them. If you'd seen what I saw, I told him, you wouldn't think so. Oh, why not indulge them, Sammy? Mad Zeke said, nudging Murphy with his bony elbow. What's the worst that could happen? You lose a couple nights' sleep? Nothing worse than you'd be doing anyway. It's a waste of my time, Murphy growled. Catch your own damned monster. I'll have nothing to do with it. I've got a murderer to hunt down. Oh, come along now, Mad Zeke began, but Murphy was already getting to his feet. Good day to the three of you, he said, and exited. Don't mind him, Mad Zeke said. He's just in a foul mood because he can't arrest anyone. How could he not believe us? I wondered aloud. He didn't even consider it. He did consider it, Mad Zeke replied. He considered it quite seriously, and then, after some consideration, he thought it was stupid. Very well, we may as well go on without him, I said. After all, I can't really think why we needed him in the first place. He is a policeman, Leslie, Anna reminded me gently. He will bring other policemen and their guns. I do not like to think of facing monster with only you and me. I will, but I do not like to think of it. Was it not you also, Leslie, who did not wish to chase monster, even with help of Murphy? Wasn't it you, Anna, who just said you'd go after it with or without his help? I retorted. Calm down, Leslie, you're not making any sense, Mad Zeke said, clapping me on the shoulder. I brushed his hand off, irritated. Listen to me. If I see that thing again, either I'm going to kill it, or it's going to kill me. While I prefer that neither of those things happened at all, I'd prefer the former infinitely to the latter. Murphy was my best shot at not getting killed, and now that he's walked out, I'm understandably in fear of my life. You do not have to do this, Leslie, Anna told me. Yes, I do, I said. That thing came after me once, and who's to say it won't do it again? It's got to be taken care of, and the sooner the better. Hopefully before anyone else gets killed. We've got the whole day, Mad Zeke said. That should be preparation enough, shouldn't it? Although my stomach turned at the thought of facing the creature again so soon, I did not argue the point. It then fell to us how to prepare for such an encounter. Our first concern was location. We decided on the grounds of my parents' manse. Since it was outside London, the chances of an innocent bystander being harmed by the monster or the ensuing conflict were low. The next matter was of weaponry. I owned a gun, a Colt 6-shot revolver, but it was still in my desk drawer in the mansion. If I was to retrieve it, I would have to enter the house and risk encountering the red door. We decided that this was too risky to attempt. Since Anna was in possession of a shotgun, we would make do with that. Although it was antique, she claimed that it was still functional. I put my trust in her wisdom and did not press the matter. I am writing this account now in Mad Zeke's hovel. In a few minutes we will set out for my house to prepare for the monster. I am afraid, I will admit. Yet, Anna's confidence gives me strength. If all goes well, when next I write, the creature will be dead and buried. I pray to God all goes well, for if it does not, it shall be Anna and I who are dead and buried by morning.